It was a perfect day. Blue skies, warm sun, and a soft breeze. The family had taken their beloved dog, Max, a large white shepherd, to their favorite beach. Max loved running along the shoreline, his paws splashing through the shallow waters. But something strange happened that day. As he played in the sand, Max started limping. His joyful barks turned into painful whimpers. At first, his family thought he had stepped on a sharp shell or rock. But when they took a closer look, their hearts sank. Barnacles, small, hard crustaceans, were attached to Max's paws, legs, and even his back. They had never seen anything like it. The family quickly became frantic, but the worst was yet to come. Buzzing filled the air, and to their horror, they saw honeybees swarming over Max's back. A hive had formed on his skin. The situation was dire. Max was in pain, and his family had no idea how to save him. They were far from help, and Max's condition was getting worse by the minute. What should have been a beautiful day turned into a desperate race against time to rescue their best friend. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the AI Film City Animal Rescue Storytelling Channel. Today, I'm excited to share a new story with you. Please relax and immerse yourself in the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Max wasn't just any dog. He was a member of the family. The Miller family had adopted Max 5 years ago when he was just a tiny, fluffy puppy. From the moment they brought him home, he became an inseparable part of their lives. He grew alongside the Miller children, Sarah and Ethan, and was there for every important milestone. The first day of school, family vacations, even during tough times when the kids felt down. Max had an incredible bond with each of them. He was always the first to greet them at the door, wagging his tail with pure excitement as if he hadn't seen them in years. For Sarah, Max was her secret keeper. She would often sit by his side, talking about her day or her dreams, knowing that Max would listen silently, his big, soulful eyes full of understanding. For Ethan, Max was a protector, a loyal companion who followed him everywhere, whether they were exploring the backyard or watching cartoons. Max even had a special connection with Mr. and Mrs. Miller. He'd sit by the fireplace with them on quiet evenings, his presence offering comfort and warmth in a way only he could. The family couldn't imagine life without Max. He had been there through every moment, big and small, offering unconditional love and comfort. So, when they realized Max was in danger, the panic and fear that gripped them were overwhelming. Losing him wasn't an option. Max wasn't just a pet. He was family. And like family, they would do whatever it took to save him, no matter how desperate the situation seemed. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind of day that seemed perfect for a family outing. But something was off. Max, the Miller family's beloved white dog, had been missing for hours. At first, they thought he was just exploring, as he often did, wandering through the woods behind their home. But as the hours passed and Max didn't return, an uneasy feeling settled over the family. The first sign that something was wrong came from Sarah, the youngest of the Miller children. She noticed that Max hadn't responded to her usual whistle, the one that always brought him bounding back to her, no matter how far away he had wandered. Panic started to set in. Max never stayed out this long. His absence felt strange, ominous even. Mr. Miller, sensing the worry in his children, decided to search for Max himself. Grabbing a flashlight and some treats, he headed into the woods, calling out Max's name. The family followed, their hearts heavy with concern. They walked through the dense underbrush, their voices echoing through the trees, but there was no sign of Max. After what felt like hours of searching, Sarah spotted something strange near an old tree, a tuft of white fur stuck in the branches. She screamed, "Dad, come here. I think I found something." The family rushed over, and as they got closer, they realized Max was in trouble. Lying under the tree, Max was barely moving. His once beautiful, fluffy coat was now matted with dirt, and his skin was covered in painful-looking barnacles. But that wasn't the worst of it. As Mr. Miller knelt down to inspect Max more closely, he noticed something even more alarming: bees. Hundreds of them. A honeybee colony had built a nest directly on Max's skin. He was clearly in distress, his body motionless from exhaustion and the weight of the nest. The sight of Max in such a state was heartbreaking for the family. Mrs. Miller gasped in horror, while Ethan stood frozen, tears welling up in his eyes. How had this happened? How had their sweet, energetic dog ended up in this terrible situation? The realization hit them hard. Max was in desperate need of help, and time was running out. But getting the bees off without further harming Max was going to be a challenge. They couldn't just pull the nest away. The bees would swarm, and Max was already too weak to handle more stress. Worse, the barnacles clinging to his skin were causing even more discomfort. Every second felt critical, but the Millers were unsure of how to proceed. Fear and frustration set in. Mrs. Miller suggested calling a vet, but they knew it could take time for help to arrive. They needed to act quickly before the situation grew worse. Mr. Miller, always the calm and resourceful one, tried to remain composed. "We can do this," he said, his voice steady but laced with concern. "We just need to be careful, and we need to work together." But even as he said the words, the family knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The struggle to help Max was just beginning, and they could only hope they'd reach him in time to save his life. The sight of Max lying helpless under the tree haunted the Millers. His once lively eyes were now clouded with exhaustion and pain, his breathing shallow and labored. With the bees swarming protectively around their nest on his skin and the barnacles clinging to his fur, it was clear that this wasn't a problem they could solve on their own. But they couldn't just leave him like this. Time was of the essence. Mrs. Miller's hands were shaking as she dialed a local vet, explaining the situation with a tremor in her voice. "Please, he's in bad shape," she pleaded. "We need someone now." The vet, compassionate but practical, explained that they couldn't send anyone out immediately, but they could meet the family at the clinic. "If you can bring Max in, we'll be ready," the vet assured them. But transporting Max in his current state seemed almost impossible. They couldn't risk upsetting the bees or causing Max further pain. As Mr. Miller paced anxiously, trying to think of a solution, Sarah tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, what are we going to do?" she asked, her eyes filled with worry. Ethan, too, was struggling to hold back tears, feeling powerless in the face of Max's suffering. Mr. Miller knew he had to stay strong for his children, but the weight of the situation was pressing down on him. There had to be another way. Suddenly, Mrs. Miller remembered an article she had read about a local beekeeper who specialized in humane bee relocation. "What if we call him?" she suggested, her voice filled with a mix of hope and desperation. "Maybe he can help us move the bees safely without hurting Max." It was a long shot, but it was better than standing by helplessly. Within minutes, they found the beekeeper's number and made the call. To their relief, the beekeeper, an elderly man named Mr. Harris, agreed to come as soon as possible. "I'll bring my equipment," he said. "We'll see what we can do for your dog." Though the family felt a glimmer of hope, the tension still hung in the air. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity, and they couldn't help but wonder if they'd reached out for help too late. While they waited for Mr. Harris, the Millers did what they could to keep Max calm. Sarah knelt beside him, whispering gently, "It's going to be okay. Max's help is coming." Ethan fetched a bowl of water, but Max was too weak to drink. Mrs. Miller paced nervously, checking her phone for updates from the vet, who was standing by. Mr. Miller stayed focused, carefully monitoring the bees, making sure they weren't becoming too agitated. After what felt like hours, they heard the sound of a truck pulling up the driveway. Mr. Harris had arrived, and with him came a small glimmer of hope. He approached the scene calmly, assessing the situation with a steady hand. "It's going to be tricky, but we'll get those bees off him," he said reassuringly. His words brought a brief moment of comfort, but the family knew the hardest part was still ahead. Saving Max was now a race against time, and every second counted. Just as Mr. Harris was setting up his equipment to carefully remove the bees from Max's skin, an unexpected car pulled into the Miller's driveway. The family, tense and anxious, turned to see who it was. Out stepped Dr. Emily Roberts, a local veterinarian known for her work with animals in distress. Mrs. Miller was confused. She hadn't called any other vet. "Dr. Roberts?" Mrs. Miller asked, surprised to see her. Dr. Roberts gave a reassuring smile. "I was in the area when I got a message from the vet clinic about Max. I know how serious this is, and I thought you could use an extra hand." The family was taken aback. They had heard of Dr. Roberts' dedication and expertise, but they never expected her to show up in person. What they didn't know was that Dr. Roberts had a soft spot for difficult cases like Max's. She had dealt with unusual animal rescues before and felt compelled to help, especially knowing time was running out. As Mr. Harris continued working on the bees, Dr. Roberts approached Max carefully. She examined him with a calm demeanor, noting his labored breathing and weakened state. "The barnacles aren't just superficial," she said thoughtfully. "They're embedded deep into his skin. We'll need to treat that after we handle the bees." Her presence brought a newfound sense of hope. The family felt like they were no longer alone in this battle. She immediately began coordinating with Mr. Harris, guiding the family on how to keep Max calm and safe while they worked. Sarah and Ethan stayed close, offering soothing words to their beloved dog as the professionals moved quickly yet carefully. But just as the beekeeper was about to start the process, Dr. Roberts had another suggestion. "If we sedate Max now, it'll make the removal of the bees and barnacles much less painful for him," she advised. "But we'll have to do it carefully, given his condition." The Millers hesitated. Sedating Max was a risk, but with Dr. Roberts' expertise, they trusted her judgment. This unexpected help and her strategic intervention could mean the difference between life and death for Max. It wasn't a choice they expected to face, but now they had hope in the midst of despair. This twist of fate had shifted everything. The tension in the air was palpable as the family stood anxiously by, watching the professionals prepare for the critical rescue operation. Max, their loyal white dog, lay on the ground, panting weakly, his body burdened by both the barnacles that had latched onto his skin and the honeybee nest that had formed over the past few days. His once bright and lively eyes now seemed dulled by the immense pain and exhaustion he was enduring. The Millers knew this was their last chance to save him. Dr. Emily Roberts, the experienced veterinarian who had arrived unexpectedly, had already administered a mild sedative to Max. The sedation would calm him just enough to make the process less traumatic, but still keep him aware enough to respond if necessary. Mr. Harris, the skilled beekeeper, adjusted his gloves and tools, ready to remove the honeybees safely without causing further harm. Every second counted. Dr. Roberts knelt by Max's side, her calm voice a constant reassurance to both the family and the dog. "We'll start with the bees," she explained, "and once they're safely removed, we'll move on to treating the barnacles." With Sarah and Ethan watching from a safe distance, their mother held them close, silently praying that their beloved pet would make it through this ordeal. The family had been through so much together, and Max had always been a comforting presence in their lives. Now, it was their turn to protect him. Mr. Harris began the delicate process of removing the bees. Using a special vacuum designed for gentle bee removal, he carefully approached the hive that had attached itself to Max's skin. The bees buzzed angrily, but Mr. Harris remained steady, his hands moving with precision. Slowly, bees began to be suctioned into the container, away from Max's skin. The process was slow and painstaking. Each time a bee was removed, the tension seemed to tighten as the family held their breath. One wrong move could result in a swarm of bees attacking Max or the people trying to help him. But Mr. Harris worked calmly, his years of experience guiding him through this dangerous procedure. "We're almost there," he said quietly, focusing on the last cluster of bees near Max's ear. His expertise in managing the hive ensured that the bees were relocated safely, without harm to them or Max. With the last of the bees gone, a collective sigh of relief washed over the family. But the battle was far from over. "Now," Dr. Roberts moved in to address the barnacles. These were no ordinary barnacles. They had become embedded in Max's skin over time, causing infection and immense discomfort. Dr. Roberts carefully examined the patches of barnacles clinging to Max's back and legs. She applied a special solution to soften them and ease their removal, then began the slow, methodical process of detaching them one by one. Max whimpered softly, his sedation keeping him calm, but it was clear that he was still in pain. The family's hearts ached as they watched, but Dr. Roberts' gentle touch and soothing voice helped keep the dog as comfortable as possible. Every time she removed a barnacle, she cleaned the area thoroughly, applying antiseptic to prevent further infection. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly as Dr. Roberts worked. The family's emotions fluctuated between hope and fear. Would Max make it through? Would the infections be too much for his body to handle? But Dr. Roberts remained focused, her years of training guiding her through the delicate process. After what felt like hours, the final barnacle was removed. Max's skin, though raw and sore, was finally free of the painful growths that had plagued him for weeks. Dr. Roberts applied a soothing ointment over the affected areas, her hands moving gently as she reassured Max in a calm voice. The family couldn't believe it. The rescue operation, which had seemed impossible at the beginning, had been a success. Max was exhausted, but he was alive, and he was finally free from the burden that had weighed him down for so long. As Dr. Roberts stood up, wiping her hands and giving the family a tired but hopeful smile, Mrs. Miller rushed over to her, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you so much," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Sarah and Ethan knelt by Max's side, gently stroking his fur, their hearts filled with relief and love for their faithful companion. Max, though weak, managed to lift his head slightly, his eyes meeting his family's with a tired but grateful gaze. The rescue had been successful, but now came the next stage, recovery. The Millers knew they would do whatever it took to help Max heal and return to the joyful, playful dog they loved so much. The atmosphere was one of overwhelming relief and joy as Max slowly began to regain his strength. The family huddled around him, their hearts overflowing with gratitude. Sarah and Ethan knelt beside their beloved dog, gently petting him, their fingers running through his once matted fur, now clean and free from the barnacles and bees that had caused him so much pain. Max's eyes, though tired, held a spark of recognition and comfort as he rested his head on Ethan's lap. Dr. Roberts gave the family a warm smile, her voice reassuring as she explained the next steps for Max's recovery. He'll need time to heal, but with proper care, he'll be back to his old self. The family nodded eagerly, already planning how they would spoil Max with love and attention during his recovery. Mr. Harris, the beekeeper, quietly packed up his equipment, leaving the family with instructions on how to prevent future bee infestations. He smiled, knowing his part in saving Max had made a real difference. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the yard, Mrs. Miller wrapped her arms around her husband. They exchanged a look of profound relief. After all the fear and uncertainty, Max was safe. The bond between the family and their loyal dog had only grown stronger through this ordeal, reminding them just how deeply they loved their pet. Max, exhausted but safe, gave a small wag of his tail, as if to say thank you. The family gathered closer, their love for him evident in every touch and gentle word. They had come together in the face of adversity, and now, with Max saved, they were more united than ever. In that moment, surrounded by his family, Max had found his strength again, and the Millers knew that everything was going to be okay. As Max recovered, the family found themselves reflecting on the experience. It had been a test of their patience, their love, and their ability to come together in the face of adversity. They knew that this was more than just about saving a dog. It was about saving a family member, about showing love when it mattered most. Through their actions, they had learned that compassion is not just a feeling, it's a call to action. And when you love something enough, you'll go to any length to help them. Now, Imagine yourself in their shoes. Would you have been able to stay calm, to save your loved one in their time of need? Share your thoughts with us. Comment below. What would you have done in the face of such a challenge? Don't forget to support animal rescues in your community and consider adopting or fostering a pet in need, because every life matters, and it's up to us to make a difference.